Hi everybody, Kim Winter. Thanks for joining us today's show. Today I have a guest based in Dubai, Australian, physician, specialist, consultant, doctor, and general all-round font of knowledge on healthcare and medical issues. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Rivers International Management Services. I happen to have known this gentleman for over 20 years. He has been a chief medical advisor here in Dubai. He has been an Australian Healthcare Advisory Council member, in fact still is, to the Australian government up here, has worked in Saudi Arabia and had his own practice way back in Australia. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Ben Hanson. Hey, Ben.
Hi, Kim. It's a pleasure to be back with you.
Great to see you. And we caught up last year in the middle of the year or so, just talking about how COVID had affected businesses, particularly in the corporate sphere and strategies around that. And of course, since then, we've had the second and third waves come through. You and I caught up the other day. I know you are now specialising in consulting to corporates around not so much about the retrospective and what to do once COVID hits business, but now you're talking about getting on the front foot, proactively building plans, strategies and execution plans to help companies manage through. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in the practice and some of the work that you're doing.
Sure, Kim. So there's a lot more demand now from companies who are really trying to get ahead of this pandemic. I think all the hopeful talk that we had last year and even the year before that things would be over quickly, I mean, that's been shown to be false. This COVID virus is here to stay for at least another 5 years. And we're going to have disruptions, probably 2 waves a year in that time. So companies really need to start making a strategy to get in front of the pandemic, to prepare their workforce, to prepare their businesses for when the waves hit. And that strategy needs to be agile. It needs to be able to ramp up quickly, ramp down quickly. And I think, especially in some countries where there's a lot of government, people have gotten the notion that just let the government do it. We'll just follow the government's advice. And while that's fine from a public health point of view, the government are not advising companies on how to do their business. And that's really quite a different thing, because you have to maintain your competitive advantage. And the market's changing really rapidly. Without a proper strategy to manage COVID, you're likely to have significant human capital disruption, supply chain disruption, financial disruption. There's been so many businesses that have gone under already just because they weren't really prepared and they were reacting rather than getting ahead, getting supplies, getting policies and procedures, educating their teams, developing hybrid work models, really reinforcing the public health measures in the workplace and testing in the workplace to keep the workplace as healthy as possible, try and prevent some of these outbreaks. I mean, what we know with Omicron is that one person that comes into your workplace can infect 250 people in one day. So I think we've seen examples of this. So it's incredibly important to have a strategy ready and to have it implemented and make sure everybody knows what that strategy is. It's got to be simple. It's got to be clear. It has to be understood by everyone in the company, from the CEO down to the lowest levels. And people have got to live and breathe that strategy.
Amazing. I mean, things have moved very, very quickly. And as I said, what I see is different about what you're doing with your organisation is that you're not only responding to companies in regards to just giving some general advice, you're being prepared to drill down, look into what their specific needs are, look at the infrastructure. I mean, I was very fortunate to sit in on a meeting you had the other day in terms of disclosure with a New Zealand company, one of the largest logistics companies in New Zealand. And, the questions you are asking about, how many drivers have they got, where are the warehouses, how many people are casual, how many are full-time, and then looking to, build a strategy around Omicron in particular, which of course is going to be coming and hitting New Zealand, from what you were saying, pretty hard. And why do you think it is that it's hitting Australia and New Zealand harder as it's beginning to hit in now?
So Australia and New Zealand are in a unique position that they haven't had any waves of coronavirus really run through. Whereas the rest of the world, Europe, North America, the Middle East, Asia, they've had big waves run through. So a lot of the population has developed natural immunity as well as being vaccinated. So you've got the double benefit. The vaccination, as we're seeing with Omicron, might help reduce serious illness and certainly helps reduce death. But it's not really doing much in terms of preventing infection. Maybe a little, but not much. So having that natural immunity really aids to that, infection prevention. Or if people get infected, it's so mild that they have no symptoms. And no symptoms usually means not very infectious for other people, usually. So Australia and New Zealand, with their tight border controls, they certainly might have preserved their business environment to an extent, but ultimately the virus is going to run through, and companies have got to be ready. It's not the case of the sky is falling. We're all going to get through this, or most of us will. But we have to be prepared, and if we're prepared, the impact will be much less. It's not inevitable that it's going to be a complete disaster for companies. So you can really minimize the impact if you're prepared and if you get out in front of it.
That's great. It's interesting to hear. And I suppose what I'm interested in is if you're helping a company build a strategy of dealing with Omicron and whatever's coming next, and I'll be interested to hear about what your predictions are as to what is coming next and how it might affect us. In regards to strategies around what's coming up with Omicron, is this about just in the workplace? Is it about the sort of things and the masking, the distancing, and the hygiene that we talked about, or is it broader? Does it stretch into the broader ecosystem? And how important is that if that's the case?
I mean, I think the basic principles are the most important, and that's where people are really still failing. And this is a very unforgiving virus. You make one mistake, and you can spread the virus through your workforce, and then what's left of the workforce is probably put into isolation or quarantine. So one mistake can have really grave consequences. So it's a case of testing your workers before they come to work. It's a case of making sure that the people are wearing the right masks. We know now the regular face masks are not very useful for Omicron, and you need to use the KN95 or the N95 masks if you can get hold of them. And you need to plan that in advance because they greatly increase the protection. Activities indoors need to be minimized because indoors is where you catch this virus. If you have to be indoors, then you've got to aim for ventilation, so opening all the windows, if there's windows to open. If there's not, then you need to think about maybe working from home or some other arrangements. Simple things like having team meetings, walking outside, or in an outdoor space will reduce the likelihood of spreading this virus. So the social distancing measures are important. Masks are critically important. Testing workers is important. But you also have to have backup plans ready to go for when the virus is going to hit you. Who are going to be your replacement drivers? What sort of shifts are you going to be running if you've lost 50% of your drivers or your warehouse staff? How are you going to manage getting supplies out to your customers? What's going to happen to your input supplies? Do you have a more of a stockpile ready? Or if you don't, can you get the essentials in without going overboard? We know these waves tend to last 8 to 12 weeks, really at the most. So you don't need to plan for a severe wave that's going to last 9 months. It's just a matter of being ready for when it comes, and it comes and hits fast. So there's no time for delays or dithering. when there's the threat of it coming, you need to implement your plan and stick to it until the wave comes and then it passes.
I guess this takes me back to the turn of the century when we had the 2YK, when everybody was thinking there was going to be a data meltdown and all the systems and processes were going to be infected. Now that never happened, but the world went into massive preparation and precaution mode for that. So what are you saying that this is what companies really now need to be doing, because not only is it a possible threat, it's a probable threat that's going to hit, especially in countries with a low vaccination and low immunity. And if they do need to do that, what are the messages? What sort of mechanisms do they need to get the message out and to get this compliance and cooperation inside the business?
So this coronavirus pandemic can really be a huge opportunity for a company to improve their internal communication and their teamwork. And now we have social media. All the staff are using social media. It doesn't just have to be Facebook. It can be Instagram. It can be Twitter. It can be emails. And it's good to utilize all of those channels. That's the first thing I would say, is that companies need to be communicating regularly to their staff using social media, not just a piece of paper stuck on a notice board. I mean, who reads that? Nobody looks at any paper these days. It's all on the phone. And then the second thing is that the communication needs to be really regular, like at least twice a week, and short and punchy, and really communicate the basic messages. No waffling, no like HR talk, no corporate speak. Simple language for all the staff to understand what they're required to do and why, and how it impacts them. And you know what a lot of companies are finding out is that staff are looking for companies to show leadership in this way. And this is a big differentiating factor for people who are considering changing companies or seeking new employment. That company's COVID readiness strategy is a major factor, just as much as salary. So companies need to think about this. If you want to attract and if you want to retain your talent, being COVID ready is a really important factor. And then I think the other issue is that companies who are not ready and who don't make the effort are potentially up for liability and litigation in the future, because this is not some acute event that's an act of God that's hit us from out of the blue now. We've had this more than 2 years now. So companies have a legal obligation to be protecting their staff and to have a plan that can be implemented and that's effective. There's no excuse not to now.
It's interesting what you say about the talent attraction, acquisition, retention piece, because as a global headhunter, I'm now getting especially younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, now asking about whether an organisation, what track record they've got in dealing with the pandemic, what strategies they've got in place to deal with it. This is something that's just quite embryonic, but it's becoming more common now, and it follows through on some research that we did recently on LinkedIn, whereby we put the question out: what was most important when people were joining an organisation? Was it salary? Was it the reputation of the company? Was it the culture of the organisation and its health and safety approach? And culture and health and safety, especially around what we're dealing with the pandemic now, were by far the highest, more than remuneration, more than career progression, and more things you might have expected a few years ago. So it resonates with what you're saying. And I think this is genuinely going to be a mode of operandi for organisations moving forward, needing to actually have a positioning, have a strategy moving forward. I mean, I know you're talking to mainly companies in Australia and New Zealand at the moment, from what I understand. But being prepared. And is it just because those countries have less resistance, or do you think that they're just more attuned to what's going on?
Well, I think in Australia and New Zealand, the government influence is strong, and people rely on governments a little too much. And so I think the population hasn't really experienced living with the pandemic. Really, there's been I mean, it's happening now in Australia, but I mean, there are people 2 years down the track, they're still very naive about a lot of things, and so are companies. The rest of the world has really been doing this for a while, and we've all been living through this for 2 years now. We've all made mistakes. There's been a lot of lessons learned. But now in a lot of countries, businesses largely returned to normal. Maybe supply chain hasn't, but otherwise we've found workarounds. We're finding ways to work from home or work remotely or hybrid work. We're finding ways to deal with the struggles that the pandemic's caused. And Australia and New Zealand really haven't been challenged with that. So now it's their turn, and they're going to have some hardships for the next 12 months because, changing corporate culture and changing the people's behaviors in a company can't be done overnight. It really takes time because people don't like change.
Awesome. Hey, Dr. Ben Hanson, head of Rivers Consulting, very unique, very innovative, very entrepreneurial healthcare practice. You've worked all around the world and specifically doing a lot of consulting, both here in the UAE and down in the Asia-Pac area as well. And I wish you well. I think what you're doing is very important. It's very impactful. And I know many of the logistics and supply chain companies have been hit hard, especially on warehousing numbers, supply chain providing essential goods into supermarkets and what have you, have had some imminent struggles in recent times. So really looking forward to seeing how things progress. And in another 6 months, I'd like to talk to you again, take some time of yours and just see how things have progressed and where we're at and whether we've had another wave by then.
Well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, Kim, and I'm sure that we'll have more waves yet. So we don't know what's coming down the pipeline, but it's going to be more of the same, maybe with a few variations, but it's going to be more of the same. So it's just a matter of whether we can adjust or not. And that's something we'll just have to wait and see.
Great. Ben, how do people get hold of you if they seek any input from you and want some of your advice? What's the best way for them to contact you?
So you're welcome to contact me on LinkedIn, Dr. Ben Hanson, Hanson, or you can look up the website, which is www.riversint, short for international.com. And I'm happy to set up a meeting and we can discuss what your needs are and how my company can be of assistance.
Ben, thanks so again. Thanks so much. I know you've got a busy day lined up today, as always. And look, stay well and keep on keeping people well. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Kim. Lovely to speak to you.
Yes, Ben.